Okay, loves, here we go again. Biology of Kundalini, Jana Dixon. We are in Immune System and Transmutation, page 49 if you're in the book. The first impulse of fight or flight activation decreases immune activity in order to conserve energy for dealing with immediate danger. After this, the immune system is activated to prepare for possible damage to the body. Candace Purr, who is the scientist that wrote the Biology of Belief, I think that was her book. Candace Purr discovered that receptors for neuropeptides and neurotransmitters are on the cell walls of the immune system. Receptors for neuropeptides and neurotransmitters are on the cell walls of the immune system, showing that the immune and endocrine systems are modulated not only by the brain, but by the central nervous system. This meta-activation of the sympathetic nervous system during Kundalini would profoundly facilitate changes in the immune system and endocrine system. So you followed that, right? Receptor sites on the immune cells, walls of the immune system that plug right into the brain. So the nervous system and the brain are hardwired to the immune system, and that affects directly the endocrine system. So what probably happens is that during the years of Kundalini, there are alternating periods of increased immunity followed by periods of reduced immunity activity. And I completely attest to this. I've gone through these waves of just having weird body things, like full body rashes, and that I just can't get over, and then it'll just mysteriously disappear again, that have correlated, I believe, with this cycle she's talking about. She says, resulting from prolonged high adrenal cortisol levels that might occur for different reasons in both the peak and exhaustion phases, 100%. Prolonged high adrenaline cortisol, I mean, that's the awakening energy, and it can act like too much, right? You're just on a go, it's exciting, but it ends up overtaxing the body. Although there are periods of radical immune activity during die-offs and reconstructing associated with hyperparasympathetic activation, the majority of the awakening probably involves immune overload, if not outright immune suppression, because of highly active nervous system. This is so big, and so many things have been attributed, I think wrongly, to one's process going through an awakening. And only by being sensitive to this possibility could we forgive and assist better those who've been experiencing awakening that has blown their nervous system out of the water or caused it to attack the body, just because the nervous system overload, just because like it's so much love light from whatever reason that came. And I believe collectively that push in the nervous system is the societal collapse that we're seeing, including the pandemic times and everything. All of that is hyper driving everyone's nervous system. So on the one hand, that's good, Kundalini, but on the other hand, that's presents a much bigger challenge that no one knows that Kundalini awakening, or hardly anyone, let's say. More and more people are knowing, but it's still not maybe as many as who need to know that what's going on to their body and immune system may be just due to this, okay? So this is where feeding the nervous system comes in, and look at how we have a society that is just coffee driven. Probably one of the most difficult things for a nervous system undergoing massive Kundalini awakening to handle, unless you're just like a jetpack, like you're just on fire and you're just going, you know. Not everyone responds as negatively to the immune suppression. Some people are able to dial themselves back to ease into that, and maybe that's where they even want to kind of live in that sort of management frequency that keeps one's attention always on the physical body, because that's a good way to stay in a frequency, even though that can be challenging also. So she says the parasympathetic growth periods are obvious by increased mitosis, which is cell division, and the illuminating glow that occurs, which makes the body-mind seem supernaturally vivid. This is probably when the immune system is back on with a vengeance. So you get like this glow, and that's even like in a pregnant woman, like the immune system is going strong and you get this glow by increased mitosis also. You will notice that the biophoton glow is always associated with massive bliss and heart expansion periods, signaling a parasympathetic rest, recovery, and opening. Macrophages are large phagocytic cells that engulf foreign material that enters the body and the dead and dying cells of the body. I'm convinced that it's largely the macrophages which do the catabolic breakdown, or the self-digestion of tissues, in preparation to building the spiritualized body capable of carrying deeper consciousness. So the macrophages, part of the immune system, comes and eats up, she's saying, the old cells associated with the old self, like literally like a butterfly process from caterpillar through the cocoon. General hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system stimulates immune response factors such as interferon, which in turn elicits increased production of nitric oxide synthesis, NOS. Macrophages produce nitric oxide in their attack on invading bacteria. So here's the off-gassing of the nitric oxide, right? Under certain conditions, this can backfire with sudden severe infection or sepsis or toxic shock involved with the excess production of nitric oxide by macrophages, leading to widening of blood vessels, and is one of the main causes of low blood pressure in sepsis. So think of how sensitive a process it is to throw the physical body into a Kundalini awakening, that the nervous system is jacked, that the brain chemistry is altered, that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system don't really know. And it is like this shock to the system where immediately the immune system starts to work on getting rid of the old system to prepare the body for the new system. But mentally, you have to be following that too. You have to be agreeing with that. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting with your own system, or someone else is going to be fighting you if you're not sure of and trusting the body process. So she says the spleen symptoms of the left brain freeze and the self-digestion or autolysis sensation during the die-offs convince me that it is the highest alchemical function of the immune system to dissolve the pupal body. The highest alchemical function of the immune system is to dissolve that earlier self so that the new self is reborn, right? That's amazing. This catabolic action is probably brought about through the activation of the reticuloendothelial system. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. RES, which is also part of the immune system. The RES consists of the phagocytic cells, primarily monocytes and macrophages, located in reticular connective tissue. These cells accumulate in lymph nodes and the spleen. The Kupffer cells of the liver and tissue histocytes are also part of the RES. To fulfill their many functions, macrophages in their activated state are able to produce more than 100 different substances. Okay, she says, she's quoting now, macrophages secrete not only cytotoxin and inflammation controlling mediators, but also substances participating in tissue reorganization. They include enzymes as hyaluronidase, electase, and collagenase, inhibitors of some of them, the antiproteins, regulatory growth factors, and others. Okay, I'm slaughtering a lot of these words, so I'm sorry. Hyaluronidase, by destroying hyaluronic acid, an important component of connective tissue, reduces viscosity and thus permits greater spreading of material in tissue spaces. Hyaluronidase is therefore sometimes designated as the spreading factor. Elastase and collagenase are enzymes capable of splitting collagen and elastin, the basic members of the connective protein. Okay, she says the above quote explains how the fossilized tension and heaviness of the uninitiated body's armor is reduced. The fossilized tension, saying which enzymes are responsible for going in and releasing tension from stuff that we've just been holding on to forever before our awakening process. Okay, so how fossilized tension and heaviness of the uninitiated's body armor is reduced as the work of dissolving the pupal body proceeds. In fact, the body after a Kundalini awakening is so much more open, painless, and flexible than the former body, that it seems that only Kundalini initiation could produce such effects by melting former hyper-contracted connective tissues associated with the conditioned ego personality. Obviously, if the ego and its patterns of tension has been overruled by a deeper consciousness, then the old tension patterns would automatically unravel. It makes sense. Considering that the body becomes inhabited by a new host, so to speak, your greater self, the immune system now adheres to the blueprint of the new, more powerful ruler, which is the true self, the empowered, awake self. Yes, that does make sense, but it can cause us to pause and think, like, when are we in resistance to that? When that's trying to happen? This is the important thing with designating mental health from Kundalini awakening, because mental health issues would look at the very same symptoms as a Kundalini awakening and say, this person's crazy, this person needs medication, they need help, they're not right. But a Kundalini awakening, you would say, oh, they're having, cell die-off. Their body is shifting from the old self to the new self. There is a dissolve of the pupal body going on. There's a detachment from their old self. Like we would have new language to talk about what's going on for someone when they're in this process that can be disconcerting, and if no one is supporting you and no one knows, then you yourself think you're crazy, right? The term macrophage means big eater. These immune cells are the evolutionary oldest and most competent. So they've been around the longest, right? These are the part of the immune cells. They're old, they're like the wise guys, and they're the biggest eaters of the immune system. They patrol, scavenge, attack, and destroy invaders. Anything that's trying to invade your body. You call on the macrophages, they just come in and send for help and stimulate a balanced response of the whole immune cascade. They clear abnormal cells and cellular debris and removed aging dead cells. Although macrophages are found all over the body, they are concentrated in the largest quantity in the spleen, lymph nodes, 2 sockets, and the little hairs in the lungs. As big eaters, it seems, I wasn't going to try to say that, Avoles, because I was going to just slaughter it too. As big eaters, it seems more the macrophage eat, the more active they get. These phagocytic macrophages, phagocytic, I think is how you say it, play a major role in acquired cell-mediated immunity, being activated and mobilized by T cells to the site of infection where they kill invading organisms. Macrophages can also function in processing and presenting antigens to lymphocyte cells to neutralize. So these macrophages, she's just laying the groundwork for what a big job they have in this process. I need to take a little drink of water while we digest that. excuse me, I feel a little dry-nosed. All immune cells originate from stem cells located in the bone marrow. Various immune cell cycles in and out of the spleen and bone marrow for special conditioning, nourishment, and instruction. This immune system trafficking follows the cortisol cycle. So if the cycle is disrupted, especially at night, then the immune system is adversely affected. Short and long-term stress is known to suppress the immune system. We know this. The lower resistance to infection while increasing allergic reaction. So we're more likely to feel like the autoimmune response, this immune system going against us too. That's the allergic reaction, suppressing the immune system. The spleen receives blood from an artery off the aorta. After passing through an intricate meshwork of tiny blood vessels, the blood continues to the liver. As blood flows slowly through the spleen, any disease organism within it are likely to come in contact with the lymphocyte and spleen tissue. This contact alone, as that invader is going through, activates the lymphocytes, which then attack it. So the spleen is very important in getting rid of these things. Blood vessels in the spleen are lined with macrophages that swallow and digest debris in the blood, such as worn out red blood cells and platelets. Because a great deal of blood circulates through the spleen, this organ serves as a reservoir for blood in times of emergency. You can experiment with this theory of metamorphic catabolic breakdown by macrophages by eating something noxious to the body like processed cheese, or processed meats, which will activate the immune system. If you eat enough of the immune activator, then within an hour you will notice a small left brain freeze with numbness in the left eye socket and forehead, which occur as the immune system activates to deal with the offending substance. Note that I may have sensed this only because I have been through major dissolution and have experienced the left brain freeze sensation before. She's saying the only reason I know this. I was able to distinguish the connection to the immune activation only because my metamorphic cycles had drastically waned, so did not confuse the temporary digestive immune response with the general metamorphic immune activity. A person without awakened Kundalini might not be sensitive to the percipience of immune activation or left brain freeze, she's saying. Maybe you wouldn't notice, but she did. I do notice at times if I consume too much dairy, I will notice phlegm in the back of my throat, excuse me. And I think this could be attributed to the same thing. Okay. Although any number of factors can trigger the adrenal cortical stress reaction, the response itself is always the same. It involves the release from the adrenaline glands of specific hormones, mainly the corticosteroids, which in turn mobilize the body against invading germs or foreign proteins. Thus, the stress response always activates the immune system. That's Body Electric by Robert Becker, MD, and Gary Selden. Whoops, she's quoting. She says, during a Kundalini awakening, the sympathetic nervous system and adrenals are perpetually, chronically activated during peak phase. With the general activation, acute Kundalini events are similar to the immediate threat response and produce adrenaline and histamines, followed by cortisol release and immune mobilization. Thus, an awakening represents a hyperactivation of self-defining and self-preservation systems of the body. However, instead of an invasion by a foreign pathogen or noxious substance, the body is simply dissolving and rebuilding a new, more refined version of self. This is the coolest thing to me. Oh, think of that. I've heard a lot of people say they don't want it, they don't want the Kundalini, or while it's happening, they want it to stop. But if you think what is exactly going on is you are refining the self, and of course people don't want to deal with the troubles. No drama, please. But actually that's the metamorphosis process, is through that kind of substance of like events, you know. And if not triggered by outside events, Kundalini will trigger these events in your life. You will have these sort of disruptions because that energy is trying to change things, trying to up-level things, and that's just how it works. It's as within, so without. Macrophages can live up to 2 to 3 years, and it's probably due to this that the main awakening phase can also correspond to this duration. The macrophages that were grown and activated during the metamorphic initiation chemistry probably have a very different nature and purpose than those produced by the body under normal chemistry. So you're getting macrophages from the old ruler self, macrophages during the change, and then you get new macrophages created by the new body ruler, as she was saying, like the higher consciousness. So yeah, they're going to be different, and the time of that change could correspond to that macrophage's life, like the transitional one. Totally possible. So when these specially activated metamorphic macrophages die out, the main transmutation period also finishes. We can assume that the cyclic periodicity of metamorphosis is a reflection of the growth and activity of the immune cells involved. The cells are activated, grow, carry out their function, and die. In the metamorphosis, the immune system increasingly becomes a full body brain, generating peptides, catabolic enzymes, dissolving and transforming tissue. Think of that, like, so that your brain is actually everywhere the more that you wake up. And I do feel that you become more aware of parts of your body that you used to never think of. Like, I can tell a lot of people still aren't body aware. They aren't aware of how they feel in their body. And that was part of my awakening journey. It actually was like a little spooky sometimes to suddenly be like, can I feel my intestines and my stomach? Like, can I feel my heart? Like the literal sensation of having an organ. Or like I could feel my stomach doing everything. And I was like, do I normally notice my stomach doing everything? I don't think so. Like, this is really weird. And so like the body awareness, she's saying, is literally because you're increasing the brain. Like your body's becoming a brain. Like you're getting receptor sites on immune cells that are everywhere. Like every part of your body is upgrading. Okay. I thought that was super cool. So, let's see. This immune activation would explain some of the heat involved with Kundalini and many of the symptoms, especially during die-off. One of the most extraordinary metamorphic phenomena is the sweating of blood. She talks about this. This may be explained by the catabolic enzymes hyaluronidase, elastase, and collagenase, we mentioned those guys earlier, produced by the macrophages. For now, bud. If they act to make the vessel walls more permeable during the height of an acute cycle, then it's conceivable that blood could ooze out of the skin through the sweat glands. For all you Christians out there, you know of the sweating of blood story of the man Jesus. She is describing that, and I've also read and felt in myself in many ways that the Garden of Gethsemane is very indicative of a dark night that has like a Kundalini awakening, like an intense Kundalini awakening period that leads to the ascension process through a death cycle. And the story can be a real story of someone, and it's also a metaphorical tale of the process of metamorphosis in the body and how the Christ itself ascends through the physical body to sit on the crown of the pineal gland as higher consciousness merged with self, right? So she's talking about in extraordinary metamorphic phenomena, one of the most is the process where the catabolic enzymes being used, the macrophages, that they make the cell walls more permeable in an acute cycle because they're doing their work so hard and they're like destroying the body almost faster than the body is being repaired. And so like blood could ooze out. Think if someone's going through such a fast process, the macrophages can't work fast enough. They're trying really hard to keep up with this person who's just like transmuting in a very short period of time. And I think that's the biggest thing I notice is that this man, Jesus the Christ, who I honor as a Christ and who showed how to go through a metamorphosis, he also showed how to do that in a very short time in some instances, like that process, the death process, because it is a process we all go through, a death process, not always physical death, but a death process nonetheless of the previously known self as we rise and rise up. This is also seen as the cross, right? This is the cross here. So as we die on the cross from our lower self, our fallen state, and return to the throne of the divine, if that happens really fast, we might bleed visibly, right? Skin and blood vessel walls are made from elastin, collagen, and hyaluronic acid. I think I said that right this time. After all, and during a certain phase of awakening, the tissue of the body could become so permeable that red blood corpuscles could squeeze out of the capillaries. The base of each sweat gland is surrounded by capillaries, and the capillary wall is only 1 cell thick, composed largely of collagen, and it can be as little as 3 to 4 millimeters in distance. While red blood corpuscles are 7.5 thousandth of a millimeter, so one can see how collagen-dissolving enzymes could increase the permeability of the capillaries, such that the red blood corpuscles could squeeze through the capillary walls surrounding the sweat glands. Just a little bit more here. My voice is really going in and out today, huh? I'm trying to find where it wants me to sit comfortably. I may have to talk with an accent to get it to go, right? I hope you don't mind. That might be a little Irish or something. Australian, maybe. Okay. Tears of blood and bloody sweat. During times of intense Kundalini heat, when emotions are being eliminated through tears, it is possible that blood vessels near the surface of the skin and in the tear ducts would rupture, rendering the sweat and tears. Saint Lugard, Blessed Christina, and several others are listed as recipients of this gift. Christ at Gethsemane also experienced bloody sweat. By Philip St. Romain, Kundalini Energy and Christian Spirituality. So someone has written a book about that already, about Christian spirituality and Kundalini energy. I have not read Philip St. Romain's book. I would like to. So during an awakening, we have the hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, creating a physiology of stress, and this increases the permeability of blood vessels, while there is an increase in endorphins and nitric oxide, which reduces smooth muscle contraction, causing the smooth muscles in the arteries to dilate and increase blood flow. The blood sweating phenomena is undoubtedly due to the increase in histamine during release during extreme stress. Although increased histamine is probably common throughout an awakening, and if there was also extreme threat to life, then a greater amount of histamine might be released, creating the bloody sweat of Jesus. Histamine produces larger pores in the blood vessels as the first step in launching an inflammatory response. So it comes in, opens the pores. This increased blood vessel porosity improves brain nutrition in times of emergency, so the brain's getting it faster, when high performance is imperative to survival. The release of histamine in the brain and the consequent sensory and extrasensory perception during Kundalini. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. The release of histamine in the brain and the consequent improvement of blood supply is probably one of the main reasons for the increased supply would be greatly enhanced by the dilated and porous blood vessels. Body elongation is another change the body can undergo during metamorphosis. So you're going to get longer. This, no doubt, is related to the permeability and relaxation of the connective tissues brought about by these collagens and elastin splitting enzymes. Romaine sites, Stefana Quinzani and St. Cathedral of Siena as examples of body elongation. Oh, so both of those people, Stefana Quinzani and St. Catherine of Siena, had elongation, okay? I imagine the connective tissue of the pupal body and the connective tissue of the transmuted body are quite different in structure. I kind of felt myself wanting to get longer. The calibration of such subtle changes might still be impossible to detect with our present science. One can assume that the transmuted connective tissue has greater strength while having less molecular density, perhaps even a change in composition. It is apparent that the butterfly self requires more space in the body, and the body armor and the associated neurotic egoism is the direct opposing force to our spiritual emergence. Absolutely so. We're going to end there today. Body armor and, this contracted self is directly opposite to the open, expanding Kundalini arisen self. And we can identify where we're still holding the body armor each time a new burst comes. But that's also what we have to get over and realize that we are in a time of the armor coming down, but before that is like the identification of everyone else's armor, including our own. So be sensitive with each other. There's a lot of armor out there. And we don't necessarily create a better world where everyone's armorless and open and vulnerable unless we can help each other through this time gently. Help each other through the awakening gently. And that is my wish. That is my goal. It starts with people closest to you.